The baby shower was supposed to be a celebration, a day filled with laughter, gifts, and the promise of new life. The courtyard of my in-laws' home in Seoul was decorated with pastel balloons, white lace curtains, and tables covered with pink and blue treats. Guests gathered in clusters, their chatter echoing through the warm spring air. I walked in wearing a hanbok. It wasn't just any hanbok. It was my mother's, carefully preserved and passed down to me. The silk shimmered in soft lavender and ivory, the ribbons tied neatly at my side. My mother had always told me, tradition is strength. Wear it proudly no matter what others say. But as soon as I entered, silence rippled through the crowd. Then came the snickers. "Look at her dress," one cousin whispered, covering her mouth. "Who wears a hanbok at a baby shower?" Another laughed. "She looks like she's at some history reenactment," a third added. Their laughter grew louder, spreading like wildfire. I felt every pair of eyes scanning me up and down, dissecting me, mocking me. My cheeks burned. I clutched my hanbok tighter, fighting the sting of tears. My husband's face tensed, but he said nothing. He shifted uncomfortably, trapped between his mother's stern glare and my pain. My mother-in-law, standing near the main table, smirked. She didn't stop them. If anything, her silence gave them permission to keep laughing. "She's so old-fashioned," someone muttered. "She wants to show off. Look at her trying to act special." The laughter cut deeper than any knife. I looked around, searching for one kind face, but found only smirks and whispers. My hands trembled as I held onto my stomach, reminding myself why I was here, for the life growing inside me, for the child who deserved a proud mother. My father stood quietly in the corner, his face unreadable. He had been against this baby shower from the beginning, insisting it would turn into a spectacle. Now watching me break under their ridicule, his eyes darkened. He hadn't moved yet, but I knew him well enough to recognize the storm building within. "Smile," my mother-in-law called out, her voice dripping with mockery. "It's a celebration after all. Or are you too embarrassed in that costume?" Laughter erupted again. My body froze. My throat ached with unshed tears, but I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry. Still, deep inside I wondered, was I wrong to wear this? Was I foolish to hold on to tradition in a world that only wanted modernity? Then, just as the ridicule reached its peak, the doors opened. A doctor stepped in, carrying a folder, his expression grave. The laughter quieted almost instantly. Guests turned, whispering nervously. My heart skipped a beat. Why was he here? And in that silence, I felt it. The moment everything was about to change. The room grew still as the doctor walked in. His presence carried a weight that silenced even the cruelest whispers. The balloons swayed lightly in the breeze from the open doors, but no one dared to laugh now. My heart raced. Why was he here? This was supposed to be a joyful event, not a medical appointment. My hands instinctively tightened over my stomach, a wave of fear rushing through me. The doctor's gaze swept across the room. He looked past the colorful decorations, past the mocking guests, and his eyes settled on me. His expression softened, but his voice was firm. "Are you all right?" he asked gently, ignoring everyone else. A murmur spread among the guests. My mother-in-law frowned, clearly irritated that the spotlight had shifted away from her carefully planned spectacle. "She's fine," she interrupted sharply. "We're having a celebration. You're interrupting." But the doctor didn't even look at her. Instead, he stepped closer to me. The crowd parted reluctantly, and I felt every pair of eyes glued to us. I apologize for intruding, but this couldn't wait. My chest tightened. What couldn't wait? The whispers returned sharper than before. "Is something wrong with the baby? Why would a doctor come here?" Did she hide something from us? I wanted to vanish. Their eyes burned holes into me, their curiosity crueler than their laughter. My knees felt weak and I swayed slightly. My father took one step forward, his jaw clenched, but the doctor raised a hand to steady me before my father could reach me. "Please, sit," the doctor said softly. He guided me to a nearby chair and I sat down, clutching the fabric of my Hanbok so tightly I thought it might tear. The room buzzed with tension. My mother-in-law crossed her arms, her voice sharp as glass. "Doctor, if you have something to say it quickly. You've already disrupted the event." The doctor turned slowly to face her. His calm demeanor contrasted her arrogance, and when he spoke, his words carried an edge that sliced through the air. "This isn't about your event," he said firmly. "It's about her health and the babies." Gasps filled the courtyard. Faces that had been smirking moments before now blanched. Some leaned in, others covered their mouths. My breath caught in my throat. My pulse thundered in my ears. I glanced at my father. He wasn't surprised. His eyes, steady and knowing, told me he already suspected what was coming. But I didn't know. Not yet. The doctor placed the folder on the table beside me. His fingers lingered on the cover for a moment, as if weighing the consequences of opening it in front of everyone. Then he looked at me and said, "There is something everyone here needs to hear." The crowd fell silent again, but this silence was heavier, suffocating. The same mouths that had laughed at me only minutes earlier now waited, hungry for drama. But what they were about to hear would not be entertainment. It would be a revelation. The air grew thick, heavy enough that I struggled to breathe. All eyes were fixed on the doctor as he opened the folder. Pages rustled softly, but the sound was deafening in the silence that had swallowed the courtyard. My fingers dug into the silk of my Hanbok. I wasn't sure if I wanted to hear what he was about to say. Fear clawed at me. Fear for my baby. Fear of being judged even more harshly than I already had been. The doctor cleared his throat, his voice steady but charged with urgency. "Your mocking ends now," he said, looking straight at the crowd. "Do you have any idea what she has endured to be here today?" Gasps rippled among the guests. My mother-in-law's lips tightened, her arms crossing defensively. "What nonsense is this? She's fine. We've all seen her." "No," the doctor cut her off, sharper than a blade. "She's not fine. She nearly collapsed in my office 2 weeks ago. She is suffering from severe anemia, and the stress you are causing her could endanger not just her, but the baby as well." The words hit like thunder. The laughter that had filled the air earlier seemed unthinkable now. Guests exchanged shocked glances, their faces draining of color. Some lowered their eyes in shame. I froze. My secret was out. The weakness I had hidden, the late-night dizzy spells, the fatigue I brushed aside. My father had known. That's why he'd been so quiet, so watchful. "She has been stronger than any of you will ever know," the doctor continued. His voice rose, carrying the weight of truth. "She came here today, despite my advice to rest, because she wanted to honor this family. And instead of support, you ridiculed her for wearing her heritage with pride." My chest tightened, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from the swell of emotions rising inside me: shame, relief, and a fragile spark of pride. My mother-in-law's face flushed crimson. That's not true. The doctor stepped forward, his gaze piercing. "Would you like me to show the test results? Because I have them right here." He held up the papers, the bold medical stamps visible even from across the courtyard. Her words died in her throat. For the first time, she looked small. My father moved then, his voice deep and steady. "Enough," he said. He stepped forward and placed a hand on my shoulder. My daughter has carried herself with grace. She has given you respect, even as you gave her none. But today, the truth has spoken louder than your cruelty." The courtyard was silent once more, but it was not the silence of mockery this time. It was the silence of shame, of regret. Guests who had laughed at me moments earlier now avoided my gaze. And as I looked around, trembling but unbroken, I realized something. The hanbok they mocked had become a symbol of resilience. I had not been wrong to wear it. I had been right all along. For a long, unbearable moment, no one moved. The only sound was the faint flutter of the curtains in the spring breeze and the dull thud of my heart pounding in my chest. The doctor's words still hung in the air like a storm cloud. "The stress you are causing her could endanger not just her, but the baby as well." I looked around at the faces that had mocked me only minutes earlier. Their smiles had vanished, their whispers had died. Now their eyes darted nervously to the ground, as though the weight of guilt pressed their heads down. My hands still trembled in my lap, clutching the folds of my lavender hanbok. For the first time since stepping into that courtyard, I no longer felt like the subject of ridicule. I felt like the center of a reckoning. My mother-in-law stood frozen near the dessert table, her face pale, except for the angry flush that spread across her cheeks. She opened her mouth once, then twice, but no words came out. Her fingers twisted the fabric of her sleeve, her composure cracking in front of everyone. Finally, she spat out in a shaky voice, This is exaggerated. The doctor is making it sound worse than it is. She has always been dramatic." "Dramatic? Do you call fainting in the middle of an exam dramatic? Do you call dangerously low hemoglobin dramatic? If she continues under stress like this, she risks hemorrhage during delivery. Do you understand what that means?" Gasps rippled through the guests again. One woman covered her mouth with her hand, another shook her head, whispering to the person beside her. Even those who had laughed the loudest now recoiled, shame etched on their faces. I bit my lip hard, trying to keep my composure as tears stung my eyes. Not tears of humiliation this time, tears of vindication. My father stepped forward, his presence commanding the courtyard. He had been silent for too long, but now his voice rang out with authority. "Do you see?" he said, his tone deep and resonant. "You laughed at her for wearing her hanbok, for holding on to the traditions of our people. You treated her like she was less than you. Yet she has carried herself with more dignity than all of you combined. Even while sick, even while suffering, she chose to honor this family by wearing the dress her mother gave her. And what did you give her in return?" No one answered. The silence was suffocating, but no one dared to break it. "You gave her cruelty," he thundered, "mockery, disrespect. And now you stand here exposed." A cousin who had laughed earlier shifted uncomfortably, his eyes glued to the ground. Another aunt muttered, "We didn't know. We didn't realize." But my father was merciless. "You didn't want to know. You didn't care to realize. You saw an opportunity to belittle, and you took it. That is who you are." My mother-in-law tried to protest again, but her voice cracked. "I only wanted what's best for my son." "Best for your son?" My father's voice rose, sharp as lightning. "And what of your grandchild? What of the woman carrying that child? Without her, there is no future for your son. Without her strength, your lineage dies here." The words struck her harder than any slap could have. Her knees buckled slightly, and she clutched the edge of the table to steady herself. The guests exchanged uneasy glances. Some nodded subtly, agreeing with my father. Others whispered to each other, their earlier laughter now a source of deep embarrassment. I bit my lip hard, trying to keep my composure as tears stung my eyes. Not tears of humiliation this time, tears of vindication. I looked at my husband then. His face was ashen, his eyes wide with shame. He stepped forward at last, standing by my side. He took my trembling hand into his, gripping it tightly. "I should have stopped them," he whispered, his voice thick. "I should have defended you." Tears finally spilled down my cheeks, but they were not tears of weakness. They were tears of release. For so long, I had held back, biting my tongue, swallowing the pain. Now, with my father's strength and the doctor's truth laid bare, I felt lighter, even as my body shook from the weight of it all. The doctor spoke again, his tone quieter now, but no less powerful. "She does not need more stress. What she needs is peace, support, and respect. If she doesn't get that, I will personally make sure she leaves this household until she is safe." The crowd stirred, murmuring in disbelief. My mother-in-law's eyes widened. Leave? She would not dare! But my father cut her off. "Try her. Try me. You will see how wrong you are." The authority in his voice made even the boldest guests lower their heads. The silence stretched on until finally, my mother-in-law bent forward. It was not graceful, it was not willing, but it was a bow. Shallow at first, then deeper, until her forehead nearly touched the table. "I was wrong," she whispered hoarsely. Her words were barely audible, but in the silence of the courtyard, everyone heard them. Gasps spread again, this time not from shock, but from disbelief that she, the proud woman who had orchestrated my humiliation, had bowed in front of me. I stared at her, my tears falling freely now, not from pain, but from the overwhelming rush of victory. For the first time, it wasn't me bowing to them. It was her bowing to me. The Hanbok I wore, the one they had mocked, the one they had laughed at, was no longer a joke. It was a symbol of strength. And in that moment, I realized something. My child would be born into a world where I had fought for respect, and because of that, they would never grow up seeing their mother as weak. I squeezed my husband's hand and lifted my chin, my father's hands still resting protectively on my shoulder. The baby shower was no longer a spectacle of laughter and shame. It had become a turning point, a reckoning, a lesson burned into every witness present. And as the doctor closed his folder, his final words echoed in my mind like a blessing. "She is stronger than you will ever know. And from today, you will treat her that way." The air in the courtyard was different now. The same people who had laughed at me earlier sat in uneasy silence, their faces pale, their eyes lowered. The pastel balloons that once seemed mocking now swayed gently in the wind, as if embarrassed by what had unfolded beneath them. And I, sitting there in my lavender hanbok, my hands resting protectively over my stomach, finally felt the strength I thought I had lost. My mother-in-law still knelt before me, her bow stiff and reluctant, but undeniable. For a woman as proud as her, that bow was a confession, more powerful than words. It was an admission of defeat. I looked at her, my tears drying on my cheeks, and for a moment, I didn't see an enemy. I saw a woman consumed by pride, by fear of losing control, by tradition twisted into cruelty. I wondered if she even realized how deeply she had hurt me, or if she only cared because her image had been shattered before her guests. But then my father's hand tightened gently on my shoulder, grounding me. His eyes told me what my heart already knew. Forgiveness does not erase the past, but it can shape the future. I stood slowly, my knees still weak, but my back straight. My husband helped steady me, his hand trembling as it held mine. He whispered, "I'll never let them treat you this way again." I believed him. For the first time, I truly believed him. Turning to the guests, I let my voice carry, though it quivered at first. "You mocked me for wearing a hanbok. You mocked me for honoring my mother and the traditions she passed down to me. But this dress," I smoothed the silk fabric across my stomach, "is not just fabric. It is history. It is resilience. It is love. And it will never be a reason for shame." The silence deepened. No one dared to look away from me now. I continued, my voice growing stronger. "I am not weak. I am not foolish. I am a woman, a wife, and soon a mother. And I will teach my child that respect is not given through cruelty, but through kindness. That dignity is not found in wealth or pride, but in truth. My words lingered, filling the space like a tide washing over jagged rocks. The doctor nodded approvingly, his arms crossed, his expression calm but proud. My father's lips curled into the faintest smile, though his eyes still burned with quiet fire. My husband, standing at my side, squeezed my hand as if anchoring himself to me. My mother-in-law finally rose from her bow. Her face was pale, her lips tight, but there was no fight left in her. When her eyes met mine, there was no triumph in them, only exhaustion, and perhaps for the first time, the shadow of humility. I was wrong, she said again, her voice lower, softer, almost broken. Gasps fluttered through the guests once more. To hear those words from her mouth was unthinkable. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence stretch, reminding her and everyone what it felt like to wait, to suffer under the weight of judgment. Then I finally nodded. Yes, I said quietly. You were. Her eyes dropped again, and this time she had no excuse, no shield of pride to hide behind. The rest of the baby shower carried on in fragments. Guests tried to smile, to laugh, to salvage the celebration, but the atmosphere had changed forever. No one dared to mock me again. No one dared to whisper. Instead, when they approached me, they bowed politely, offering apologies disguised as compliments. How beautiful your Hanbok is, one aunt murmured, her voice trembling. You are very strong, another guest said, avoiding my gaze. But I didn't need their apologies. I already had what I needed, my father's truth, my husband's support, my own dignity. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting the courtyard in amber light, I felt the baby kick gently inside me. My hand pressed against my stomach, and I smiled. This life, this baby I carried, was worth every tear, every humiliation, every fight. Because from this day on, they would grow up knowing their mother never bowed to cruelty, only to love. When the last guest left and the courtyard was finally empty, I stood in the quiet with my father. He looked at me, his eyes soft but proud. He said, "You did well today." I swallowed hard, my throat tight. I almost broke. He shook his head. No, you bent, but you did not break. That is strength. That is what they will remember. Tears filled my eyes again, but this time they were warm, not bitter. Thank you, I whispered, for protecting me. He placed a hand over mine, resting on my stomach. Not just you, him too, he said, softly, nodding toward the life within me. He will know his mother's strength because he will feel it every day. In that moment, I knew he was right. The Hanbok that once felt like a burden now felt like armor. The baby shower that started as a stage for humiliation ended as a stage for truth. And I, once trembling, once afraid, stood taller than I ever had before. This was no longer just the story of a baby shower. It was the beginning of a legacy. And as I looked at the horizon, glowing in the fading light, I whispered to my child, "You will never have to bow for respect. You will inherit it through love."